They played games believing you would never learn the language of manipulation. They thought you would keep reacting, keep explaining, keep proving your worth inside the maze they built. You were meant to be predictable, emotionally tangled in their chaos, blind to the design of their deceit. But something shifted. You stopped fighting inside their system and started rewriting it. You realized their power came not from brilliance, but from your participation. The moment you stepped back, the illusion cracked. They played tricks, but you changed the structure itself. Instead of defending yourself, you observed. Instead of reacting, you responded with precision. You stopped letting emotion lead and let silence do the heavy lifting. That is when they lost control. When you refused to compete in a game that only benefited them. You became the variable they could not calculate, and that turned the board upside down. The key to breaking a manipulator's grip is not confrontation. It is confusion. You stopped feeding them predictability. Every time they expected you to shout, you went quiet. Every time they tried to guilt you, you smiled instead. Every time they waited for a breakdown, you disappeared into calm. That contrast broke their rhythm. They rely on patterns, on reading your reactions, on knowing which emotional button to press. But you removed the buttons entirely. That made you unreadable. Manipulators cannot survive in uncertainty. They depend on control, and you replaced control with unpredictability. Psychology teaches that control is the illusion of stability. When you refuse to give them that illusion, their confidence collapses. Their tricks become noise, powerless against composure. You didn't fight harder, you fought smarter, and that shift rewired every rule they once used to bind you. They played mind games, but you studied the mind itself. You learned that every trick they pulled followed the same pattern. Flattery before betrayal, guilt before punishment, silence before strike. Once you saw the pattern, the magic faded. You stopped being their audience and became their analyst. That is the beauty of awareness. It turns cruelty into data. You stopped asking why they lied and started watching when they lied. You began reading motives through pauses, truths through tone, intent through silence. They tried to keep you emotional, but you became clinical. That mental shift dismantled their control. Because once you can name a pattern, you no longer suffer from it, you master it. They played tricks based on impulse, you countered with calculation, and that made you untouchable. They cannot manipulate a person who has outgrown emotional dependency. At first, they mocked your detachment. They called it coldness, they labeled it ego. They claimed you changed. They were right, you did. You stopped apologizing for protecting your peace. You stopped chasing closure from people addicted to chaos. They wanted reaction, but you gave them reflection. They wanted dominance, but you gave them distance. They wanted submission, but you gave them strategy. That reversal exposed the truth. They were never powerful. They were parasites feeding off the chaos they created. When you removed access to your energy, their tricks fell apart. People mistake control for power, but control without an audience is emptiness. You took away their audience, and in doing so, you left them stranded in the theater of their own performance. They were never playing chess. They were just juggling mirrors, and you stopped watching. You learned that silence is not weakness. It is precision. They used to interpret your quiet as surrender. Now they fear it, because silence leaves room for their paranoia to grow. Every time you said nothing, they replayed their own actions in their mind, unsure what you knew. That uncertainty destroyed them more than confrontation ever could. You didn't need revenge because silence made them fight themselves. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance. The mind's collapse under its own contradictions. Their tricks relied on you seeking clarity. But clarity was never the goal. Confusion was. When you stopped chasing answers, their entire strategy failed. You no longer begged for explanations, you already had them. That internal calm became your dominance. They played tricks, but you rewrote silence into strategy. They were masters of illusion, but you mastered perception. They lied to shape your reality, but you learned to step outside of it. Once you detached from their narrative, their control vanished. They tried to frame you as emotional, unstable, dramatic, but reality speaks louder than accusations, and you let truth do the work. You no longer needed to convince anyone. You simply became consistent. Consistency dismantles illusion because it exposes contrast. Every lie they told aged poorly beside your patience. Every rumor they spread turned into evidence of their obsession. Every manipulation they attempted became a spotlight on their own weakness. You didn't expose them directly. They created smoke, you became air, transparent, essential, impossible to grasp. Their arrogance blinded them to timing. Manipulators rush. They believe they can outpace truth. But truth moves slowly and crushes fast. You waited while they tangled themselves in their own schemes. That patience was your revolution. You didn't compete with their performance. You waited for it to collapse under its own weight. The best revenge is always time. It reveals every falsehood, burns every mask, exposes every agenda. You stopped reacting and let time handle what ego cannot. They wanted chaos, but you gave them stillness. And stillness is the one thing illusion cannot survive. They wanted to draw you into the maze. You stood outside and watched it burn. Once you changed the rules, everything inverted. They tried to provoke you with gossip, but gossip lost power against truth. They tried to guilt you with silence, but silence became your strength. They tried to intimidate you with presence, but you no longer flinched. The game ended the moment you realized participation was optional. They depended on your confusion to validate their control. You withdrew that validation. That move was quiet but final. You became the rule itself, the standard, the structure, the calm they could not corrupt. They wanted a puppet. They found a strategist. They wanted an easy victory. They found an opponent who stopped playing altogether. The aftermath was poetic. You didn't need to announce your win. They exposed themselves through desperation. The more they pushed, the more reality turned against them. People began to notice the cracks in their mask, the desperation behind their smiles. You didn't need to ruin their image. They did it for you. Manipulators destroy themselves when denied attention. The absence of your energy left them hollow, addicted to control they could no longer taste. Meanwhile, you kept building, kept growing, kept living. That difference was your silent triumph. They wanted you to react, but instead you rebuilt your entire self in their absence. They lost the game they created, not because you cheated, but because you evolved beyond it. They waited for your reaction like vultures waiting for movement. They needed noise to survive. Your defense, your explanation, your anger. Silence was the one thing they were not prepared for. So you gave them nothing. You let silence do the heavy lifting. It moved slower, colder, more surgical than any words could. Silence became your weapon, not because it was passive, but because it forced them to confront themselves. Every manipulator relies on reaction to measure control. When you stopped reacting, they lost the ability to measure anything. They began to fill in the blanks themselves, projecting guilt where you gave none, inventing stories to explain your calm. Silence turned their own mind into your greatest ally. They underestimated how loud it could be when you said nothing. Because silence does not echo, it lingers. It reminds them of everything they hoped you wouldn't understand. Words can be twisted, but silence cannot. They wanted debates, explanations, emotional justifications they could weaponize against you. They wanted you loud, because loudness can be labeled. Silence cannot. Silence disarms them because it cannot be attacked directly. It leaves no weakness to exploit, no doorway to enter. In silence, they face their own reflection. Their tricks lose footing. Their lies hang in the air without resistance, and the tension begins to eat at them. The truth about silence is that it's not about absence. It's about control. You control the tempo, the tone, the focus. You dictate who breaks first. And they always do. Silence stretches their confidence until it fractures. They begin confessing through over-explaining. They expose their insecurity through nervous laughter. They call you heartless because they feel powerless. They call you distant because they cannot reach you. Silence becomes judgment, and they feel its verdict long before you ever speak. They always believed dominance came from volume. They measured strength by who could talk longer, argue louder, persuade faster. You unlearned that illusion. You understood that true control comes from restraint. The power of silence lies in how it creates discomfort. Discomfort reveals truth. When they speak to fill the quiet, what spills out is their guilt, their fear, their insecurity. You never had to accuse them. They accuse themselves by talking too much. That is the beauty of silence. It doesn't fight, it exposes. It lets the unbalanced collapse under their own noise. You found peace in watching it unfold. Silence became your bodyguard, standing between you and the chaos they tried to drag you into. While they performed, you observed. While they shouted, you analyzed. And when the dust settled, your calm was the only thing left standing. Psychology defines silence as social discomfort, a gap people rush to fill because they fear what it reveals. You use that instinct against them. You realize that people reveal their motives when they feel unheard. They show their desperation when they try too hard to explain themselves. They show their deceit when they stumble to justify it. You didn't need to interrogate them. The silence did it for you. Every pause became a mirror reflecting their own contradictions. Every unanswered message became evidence of their insecurity. Every moment of your quiet confidence pushed them further into panic. They mistook your silence for weakness. But that was the trap. You understood that in a world addicted to noise, silence is the most disorienting sound of all. Your silence grew heavier than their manipulation. They mocked it at first, calling you cold, detached, unbothered. But mockery turned to fear when they realized silence could not be argued with. They could not provoke it, twist it, or escape it. It followed them like a shadow that reminded them no longer controlled you. Every time they expected an argument, they met stillness. Every time they pushed for chaos, they met composure. Silence stripped them of their favorite currency, reaction. And when they could no longer feed off your reaction, their confidence starved. They began to crumble, not because you attacked, but because you stopped participating. That's the moment power shifts. Not when you win a debate, but when you no longer find one necessary. Silence allowed you to study them without being studied. It gave you time to see their habits, to watch their patterns, to map their insecurities. Every trick they tried, every manipulation they repeated, you saw it all without interruption. They thought your stillness meant ignorance, but it meant calculation. You learned to listen for tone, not words. You learned to read pauses instead of explanations. You learned that silence is not the absence of understanding. It is the collection of it. When the time came to act, you knew their next move before they did. Silence prepared you in ways chaos never could. You became the one thing manipulators cannot predict: patient. They felt it when your energy shifted. When you stopped explaining yourself, they lost the script. When you stopped correcting lies, they lost the stage. When you stopped defending your name, they lost control of the story. That silence made them unravel. They started explaining things you never asked about, started defending actions you never mentioned. Their guilt spoke louder than any argument you could have made. The mind cannot stand a void, and silence is the void that reveals everything. You didn't have to point out their wrongs. Their overreaction exposed them. That is the brilliance of restraint. You didn't destroy them through confrontation. You let them destroy themselves trying to fill the quiet you left behind. Silence is discipline disguised as mystery. It makes them wonder if you are done, or if you are simply waiting. It makes them question what you know, what you plan, how much you've seen. That uncertainty is psychological torture for those who depend on control. They will try to provoke you, to bait you into breaking it. But the longer you remain silent, the more they lose composure. They fear silence because it means they have no influence left. They can only attack what responds. They can only manipulate what engages. You became unreachable, and that made them powerless. Silence taught you that you do not need to win arguments. You need to remove access. You let the stillness speak for you, and it spoke volumes. Every empire built on manipulation collapses in silence. Lies thrive in noise because noise distracts from their fragility. When you remove noise, they had to stand on their own, and they couldn't. Silence stripped them bare. It removed the performance, the illusion, the false control. You let them reveal who they were without lifting a hand. You let them drown in the quiet they once mocked. There is no revenge purer than watching someone fold under the weight of their own words. That is what silence does. It avenges without vengeance. It teaches without preaching. It ends wars without striking a single blow. You stood still, and the truth worked for you. They built their confidence on your reactions. Every sigh, every apology, Every desperate explanation fed them. Your attention was the currency that kept their arrogance alive. They could insult you one moment and watch you defend yourself the next. That rhythm became their drug. But one day you stopped. You withdrew that validation. You took back the energy that once fueled their illusion of control. And that act, quiet, deliberate, final, was more destructive than any confrontation. Because without your validation, they had to face themselves. And what they found there was unbearable. Their charm felt hollow, their power felt fake, their control felt temporary. You turned off the applause, and the performer froze mid-scene. They realized the stage was never theirs. It was yours all along. People who manipulate crave validation like oxygen. They need to know their words still land, their tricks still work, their presence still matters. You used to give it freely, through forgiveness, through explanation, through empathy. But once you withdrew it, everything changed. You stopped reacting to their guilt traps, stopped answering their accusations, stopped rescuing them from the consequences of their own choices. You became emotionally unavailable to their chaos. That silence killed their illusion of dominance. Psychology calls it narcissistic collapse. The moment the manipulator loses their supply. Without the energy they drained from you, they wither. They are forced to sit alone with their flaws, with no audience left to applaud their justifications. You became the mirror they cannot look into anymore. They once mistook your empathy for weakness. They weaponized your care, twisted it into obedience. You tried to explain, to make peace, to meet them halfway. But halfway with a liar leads nowhere. When you withdrew validation, you also withdrew the illusion that they were worth reasoning with. You stopped negotiating with deception. That shift broke the pattern entirely. You no longer existed as their reflection. You became their contrast. Every manipulator depends on a reflection to confirm their importance. Remove that, and they collapse into irrelevance. Your indifference became punishment because it proved what they feared most, that they were never as significant as they pretended to be. You didn't ruin them, you simply stopped feeding their ego, and starvation did the rest. The power of withdrawal lies in how quiet it feels. You didn't shout. You didn't announce your detachment. You just disappeared emotionally. You stopped responding to their tests. You stopped showing pain when they tried to hurt you. You stopped giving validation to actions that deserved consequences. That absence spoke louder than 1,000 confrontations. They tried to provoke, to bait you back into reaction, but every attempt was met with calm indifference. And in that stillness, they saw the truth. They no longer mattered. To someone who thrives on control, nothing is more terrifying than becoming powerless. You let them feel that void, not through revenge, but through absence. Silence became your closure. You once believed love meant understanding, but real understanding includes boundaries. When you withdrew validation, you did not become cold. You became wise. You realized that validation is power, and power given to the wrong hands becomes a weapon against you. They used to drain you through pity, through drama, through self-victimization. But you stopped providing comfort to people who cause chaos. You stopped listening to lies disguised as apologies. You stopped rewarding their pain theatrics. Without your emotional participation, they had no performance left to give. That is the essence of growth, knowing when to stop giving what others have not earned. Your silence became a wall they could not climb. They panicked when you stopped caring publicly, because public validation is their stage. They needed others to see you still reacting, still pleading, still proving your worth. It kept their illusion alive. But when you stopped explaining your side, the illusion died in front of everyone. Their story lost credibility, their mask lost shine. They could no longer paint you as unstable or guilty, because your calm made their chaos obvious. The contrast exposed them. You didn't have to defend your truth. The truth defended itself when you withdrew your energy. The crowd that once believed them began to see the cracks. Because confidence built on manipulation collapses the moment it loses validation. The irony is that they never valued your validation when they had it. They treated it as a given, an endless supply they could draw from. They thought you'd never stop giving, but you did. And the moment you stopped, they began to chase it. They reached out in guilt, in rage, in denial, testing if they could still trigger you. You stayed composed. You watched without reaction. Each attempt grew more desperate. They wanted the fight back, the emotional fire, the tears. You offered none. They began to spiral, not because you punished them, but because you ignored them. Manipulators can handle anger. They cannot handle irrelevance. You became untouchable the moment you no longer needed to be understood. Withdrawing validation is psychological warfare disguised as peace. You did not need to fight back. You simply withdrew the power they stole. When you stop rewarding bad behavior, people reveal who they truly are. Some crumble, some lash out, some vanish, but all lose their grip on you. You stop being their emotional puppet, and that independence rewrote the story entirely. They used to dictate the rhythm. Now they dance to silence. They once prided themselves on control, but control dies when the other person no longer plays. You rewrote the rulebook without warning. You stopped trying to be the hero and became the judge, silent, patient, final. The beauty of withdrawal is that it heals you while destroying them. You regain focus, self-respect, peace. They lose their anchor, their audience, their purpose. Every manipulator defines themselves through others, and you erased that definition. You stopped feeding the system that oppressed you. That's what liberation looks like. Not revenge, but emotional detachment so complete it feels divine. You didn't need to expose them, time did. You didn't need to humiliate them, their own actions did. You simply stopped being a source of validation, and that absence revealed their true emptiness. They are haunted now, not by your presence, but by the silence you left behind. They felt it before they'd understood it. You didn't announce the change, you didn't warn them, you didn't post a single word about it. But something about your energy shifted, and that's what terrified them. You stopped carrying desperation in your tone. You stopped walking with the weight of other people's chaos. You stopped moving like someone waiting for permission. The air around you grew heavier, not darker, just charged, deliberate, unshakable. They used to read your emotions like an open book, but now they can't. They reach for your old reactions and find nothing but composure. They try the same old tricks and watch them dissolve. You no longer rise to bait, you no longer chase closure. You no longer explain yourself. That absence of need, the quiet confidence that replaced it, has become the signal of your transformation. They didn't lose you the day you walked away. They lost you the moment your energy stopped serving their power. They were addicted to the version of you that cared too much, the version that overgave, over-explained, over-apologized, the one who believed kindness required self-destruction. But that version died quietly, without announcement, the day you realized peace was worth more than approval. Your energy shifted from proving to protecting, from chasing to choosing. That shift disoriented them because your power stopped being external. You no longer derived strength from validation, attention, or reaction. It started coming from within. They cannot feed on someone who no longer bleeds. And that realization stings them, because now, even when they provoke, they feel your distance. You became untouchable, not because you hid, but because you no longer match their frequency. When your energy evolves, chaos cannot reach you. It short-circuits before it touches your calm. They sense this, and it unsettles them in ways they can't explain. Your silence grew heavier than their noise. Before, they could pull you into endless arguments, twisted explanations, emotional exhaustion. Now, your calm suffocates them. You no longer meet chaos with chaos, you meet it with quiet power. You say less, but your presence speaks louder. Every gesture, every glance, every pause carries a message they can't decode. That's the effect of an energy shift. They can't locate you anymore. You've outgrown the map they built to control you. They are still playing the same old game, unaware that you moved to a new level. They talk about you like they still understand you, but they don't. The same things that used to break you now barely touch you. That calm feels like arrogance to them, because they can't tell the difference between peace and power. They are used to dominance through chaos. You taught them what dominance looks like through stillness. You stopped moving in reaction to them. That's when everything changed. When your energy shifted, your priorities rearranged themselves. You stopped asking, why? They hurt you and started asking, why? You tolerated it. That self-awareness pulled you out of the cycle. They depended on your confusion, because confused people stay compliant. But you started thinking clearly. You recognized patterns, noticed inconsistencies, trusted your intuition. Every time they tried to pull you into emotional turbulence, you responded with detachment. That detachment didn't make you heartless. It made you free. They mistook that freedom for arrogance. But that's only because they've never lived outside their own dependency. You no longer live to prove your innocence or justify your worth. That shift in energy made their control obsolete. They kept pressing old buttons that no longer worked, and each failure chipped away at the illusion of control they built around you. Imagine how they established guidelines meant to keep you small, to confine your every breath. Those rules glinted with the promise of safety, but carried a hidden edge, one aimed straight at your independence. A casual observer might think these rules were harmless, just boundaries for a shared space. But you sensed the deeper plot. Each rule chipped away at your freedom, each demand pushing you towards silent obedience. They disguised these constraints as concerns or mutual agreements, yet the taste felt bitter. Behind kind words lurked the intention of placing you under a quiet control. At first, you tried to follow the script, hoping kindness or compromise might protect the harmony. You swallowed doubts, adjusted yourself to fit their narrow mold, letting them believe you accepted the role of the docile partner. However, in the stillness of late night, your mind churned with unease. You realized this wasn't a relationship built on respect, but on invisible shackles. That might have been the final straw. You decided to break every rule they formed, not out of rebellion for its own sake, but to reclaim yourself from illusions that you ever belonged to them. With each broken rule, you tasted a fresh rush of air, a sense that your inner voice was returning. They had hoped you would cower in guilt, but you found yourself thriving, standing tall without regret. A hush followed every rule you shattered, as if the entire dynamic paused to register the shift. The one who wrote the rules couldn't fathom your audacity. They had banked on your fear of conflict or your craving for validation. Perhaps they believed you would always stoop to keep the peace. So when you calmly crossed out each boundary they set, you left them unsettled. They tried to enforce old agreements by repeating statements about unity or trust, but the words rang hollow. You recognize that real unity doesn't arise from a partner's one-sided mandates. Trust doesn't spring from restricting someone's sense of self. So the more they insisted, the more you realized how much of their power relied on your willingness to comply. Without that willingness, their illusions of being the authority crumbled. And so, you advanced, day by day, shattering illusions they had woven so carefully. Friends or outsiders might ask if you feared a backlash, yet you found a strange confidence in forging your own path. That confidence unsettled them far more than if you had fought with anger. By acting with calm certainty, you showed that you no longer needed their acceptance or pity. Suddenly, their rules looked like cheap attempts at control. They discovered you could walk out any moment, carry your heart and soul wherever you chose, unafraid of any punishment. The one who set the rules realized they'd never again see you bend as before. Think of all the nights you once spent trying to rationalize their conditions, asking yourself if you were overreacting. But each sunrise confirmed that your instincts were right. Those so-called rules only benefited them. They might have paraded them under the guise of mutual respect, but you saw how each line was drawn to curb your potential or quell your curiosity. They insisted you remain within the lines of their comfort zone. If you questioned them, they changed the subject or turned the blame on you, wielding guilt as a weapon. That guilt pressed into your chest, urging you to comply. Over time, you grew weary of the subtle tyranny. Something in your spirit started pushing back. You stopped apologizing for normal human emotions. You refused to hush your laughter or hide your ambitions just to make them feel in control. In those small rebellions, you tasted the first droplets of real freedom. Each act of defiance, no matter how minor, reminded you that you owned your life. And once you realized you owned it, nobody else could set rules for how you expressed your soul. They recognized that shift too, though they'd never admit it out loud. Their panic manifested as new demands, but each demand found you less pliable, more certain of your right to shape your life. Breaking the rules they'd written began to feel as essential as breathing. A subtle darkness shadowed your every move, as though they were always watching, ready to chastise if you stepped out of line. But the day came when you stepped out of line and did not bother to look back. You simply kept going. The hush that followed was more telling than any argument. They tried to pretend your disobedience was a phase. They spread stories about your change in behavior, painting you as reckless or ungrateful. But the narratives failed to capture the reality. Your choice was an act of self-rescue. You were done, dancing to rhythms that never respected your spirit. Freed from that oppressive beat, you explored your own pace, listened to the quiet song in your chest that had lain dormant. Others began to see something new in your eyes, a fearless glint that said you'd confront any storm. They attempted to rope you back into their world of rules, but you brushed them aside like dust. It wasn't a roar of defiance, just a calm, absolute refusal to live any further under constraints that lacked respect. The watchers, some curious, some disapproving, bore witness. Through the Seisdikshar Feyr, Bertofa whispers you gleaned how deeply your shift unsettled them. People fear unrestrained spirits, for it's easier to label them rebellious or monstrous than to understand them. You no longer cared. The absence of apology in your posture told them you'd chosen yourself over their illusions. Perhaps the darkest humor arises in how quickly they tried to rewrite the story once they saw you thriving. They began describing how they had never truly limited your freedom, how the rules were misunderstandings. Yet you recalled each time they used those rules as a leash. Each moment they tried to corral your identity. Now that you'd slipped the leash, their memory became conveniently blurry. This shift didn't surprise you. Controlling types rarely admit wrongdoing, especially after losing control. The new narrative portrayed them as supportive, even protective. But you had endured enough to see through the facade. Knowing your ability to flourish beyond their boundaries shook their confidence. Their attempt to reclaim the upper hand through revisionist history only made them appear weaker. Meanwhile, your sense of direction sharpened. When you finally spoke, you did so with unwavering calm, laying out how you'd never again be contained by anyone's narrow worldview. The tension in the air said it all. They recognized a force beyond their grasp. No wail or bargain could drag you back into that cage. The watchers, who once smirked at your quiet compliance, watched with uneasy stares, uncertain how to engage a spirit that found its own wings. The old version of you might have extended an olive branch, tried to smooth over ruffled feathers to keep peace. But the new you recognized that such efforts would only place shackles on your ankles again. You gleaned that real peace arises from self-respect, not from earning validation from those who once insisted on controlling you. While they tried to guilt or coax you back, you marched toward the life you deserved. The darkness that once intimidated you now became a friend, teaching you that no external pressure can overshadow an internal compass. In stepping away from their scripted roles, you discovered an inner reservoir of creativity. Freed from stifling conditions, your mind blossomed with ideas, your heart with ambition. The old group gawked, whispering that you'd gone too far. But you'd already tried playing it safe, found it suffocating. So you embraced the paradox. Sometimes to save yourself, you must be willing to disregard all the rules others try to impose. And in that disregard, you found an entire horizon of potential. They set the rules in your relationship. You broke them all and thrived. Others doubted you'd manage alone, claimed you needed their structure. But your progress proved otherwise. Each day brought a small win or a revelation about your own strength. Confidence replaced caution. Excitement replaced dread. Those who set the rules started to regret underestimating you. They realized the rules they'd placed had actually become your reasons to rebel. They saw you flourish in the absence of their control. A slow horror gripped them as they realized you did not sink without their guidance. You soared. This success bit into their pride, for it dismantled the myth that you were too weak or too naive to function independently. They might make final attempts to lure you back with half-hearted offers, but your mind no longer wavered. The bond they'd forced had snapped. In that moment, it became clear that your happiness was never contingent on their definitions or allowances. You smiled at how liberating it felt to shape your days without a looming sense of guilt or self-minimization. Freed from illusions, you directed your own path. Some might say your transformation veers into arrogance or rebellion for its own sake. Let them say what they want. The deeper point was always about preserving your essence, refusing to be labeled as someone who cannot decide for themselves. They never predicted you'd rise this high, or that you'd do so gracefully. That might sting them as much as any direct confrontation. They see your life expanding in directions they never considered possible under their framework of rules. They attempt to sow doubt again, but your new foundation stands immovable. The joy you radiate, subtle though it is, unsettles them more than anger. Anger would suggest you still care about their opinions. Instead, your indifference seals your independence. Over time, you find new ways to channel creativity, forging alliances with those who appreciate a mind unfettered by pointless restrictions. Each step into that new territory reaffirms your decision to smash the rules. Exhilaration replaces the old fear that once lived in your chest. Others, observing from the edges, begin to question their own cages. Quietly, you've become a symbol of what happens when one refuses to bow to illusions. In the final hush, your gaze drifts back on the path behind you. Broken rules, broken illusions, but a heart that pulses with freedom. The watchers who set those rules remain in a confused state, trying to patch the cracks in their worldview. They might throw out attempts at sabotage or gossip, but you walk on. You're not the docile figure they assumed. Instead, you harness a power discovered by stepping beyond the lines they drew. Freed from a script that never cared for your spirit, you carve a new story. This story echoes with subtle darkness. Yes, but also with unstoppable determination. Sometimes you sense their eyes on you, still expecting you to falter, to come crawling back. You do not falter. Do not return. By refusing their conditions, you soared, and that remains your silent victory. After all, the most remarkable vengeance is your quiet success. Rules can be comforting to those who fear the unknown, who prefer boundaries that define each step. However, the moment a person aligns too closely with these constraints, something vital withers. Imagine a stage set under dim lights, each corner overshadowed by strict instructions, telling the performer how to move, what lines to utter, how to react when the unexpected happens. The performer, dutifully following these cues, never wanders off the script. At first, this might feel safe, free from the confusion of choice. Yet beneath that, safety slithers a creeping emptiness. Without new experiences and personal freedom, the performer's potential is choked off. Life becomes a hollow rendition of a performance, repeated night after night, with no room for experimentation or deeper passion. This stagnation seeps into more than just creative endeavors. It touches every aspect of existence, including how one copes with pain or recovers from damage. A mind locked in place by rules struggles to find that spark of individuality needed for true healing. In the wake of trauma, many cling to guidelines and well-meaning advice, an attempt to impose order on the chaos of memory. But genuine healing often requires stepping beyond those lines, wandering into uncomfortable emotional terrain where raw feelings can be confronted and integrated. People try to remain within prescribed notions of acceptable emotional responses, so they bottle up sorrow, anger, and fear, labeling them as problems to be pushed aside. In that bottle, the emotions ferment, growing more potent until they break free in unplanned ways. Such is the dark humor of restricting yourself with rules. The more you tighten your grip, the more your spirit rebels. The longer one remains in that cramped mental space, the more the soul yearns to break through. Healing, like self-discovery, demands that you test the edges of what you thought possible. Only by doing so can you unearth the capacity you never dreamed you held. So while rules might protect in the short term, they stand as high walls that obscure all that lies beyond. And if you cannot see beyond, you remain stuck in a narrow corridor of life, never tasting the wider world that might set you free. Think about a labyrinth formed by rigid guidelines. Some rules might come from family, others from society, friends, or personal fears. For instance, someone might carry the notion that tears are shameful, that showing pain admits failure. Another might believe anger must remain hidden, never expressed. When these rules blend, the result is a labyrinth with corridors leading nowhere, each turn instructing a person to stifle one part of themselves or suppress another. Over time, it becomes difficult to differentiate personal identity from the set of instructions that shape behavior. In that labyrinth, healing from adversity becomes nearly impossible, because healing relies on understanding the full range of your emotions, from fury to sorrow to hope. Yet strict rules discourage such exploration. A wound remains raw if the mind can't process it fully. Suppose someone experiences heartbreak or betrayal, but abides by an unwritten law that forbids talking about it openly. The pain festers in secrecy. The labyrinth's walls block any path to emotional release. Meanwhile, the person wonders why relief remains so elusive. The mind yearns to vent, to scream, to cry. Instead, they stay silent, obeying rules that demand composure. Such composure becomes a grave that buries feelings still alive. So they trudge deeper into this maze, losing sight of an exit. In that gloom, a quiet desperation builds. Something must give, eventually. Either the soul remains entombed by compliance, or a moment arrives where one must shatter the walls. Breaking those walls might look reckless from the outside, but inside, it unleashes an abrupt exhale of relief. Many follow those guidelines out of habit, or fear, or the desire for belonging. But there comes a moment when someone discovers that these frameworks do not align with who they really are, that someone can feel an urgent pull from inside, a whisper suggesting that living in compliance no longer offers growth. The urge to break free surges, fueled by personal values. Those values might be integrity, curiosity, a desire for real connections, or a refusal to compromise on self-expression. The watchers see this stirring of independence and grow uneasy, as though suspecting that their hold is fading. They tighten the rules or intensify the illusions. Yet the person's decision to act beyond these structures remains unwavering. It becomes less about rebellion for rebellion's sake, and more about honoring the call from within. Acting on that call unleashes a darkness, not equated with evil, but with relentless self-loyalty. A darkness that is misunderstood by those who prefer comfort over liberation. In taking this path, the individual sometimes earns the label of villain. Yet that label is irrelevant, overshadowed by the sense of alignment with personal values. The watchers cannot control such a soul. Illusions lose effect when someone sets their sights on the horizon, rather than the chains underfoot. A hush settles among onlookers as the person takes another step, heedless of the watcher's scorn. Personal reasons supply a drive more potent than any communal framework. Each day, the spirit grows bolder. The watchers might whisper warnings, but these fall on ears that have chosen a different tune. Although the watchers speak of chaos or betrayal, the individual only hears a chorus of excuses to remain stagnant. This tension grows thick. A single word from the watchers can no longer hold the power it once did. The one who follows inner values does not seek external validation. No external scolding or attempt at guilt can redirect a will that is anchored in a deeper moral code. The watchers sense it. They sense that their illusions no longer fascinate. And so, the watchers retreat slowly, leaving that individual to navigate a path of self-chosen meaning, a path unafraid of the unknown. Those personal values become a guiding flame that banishes the gloom once created by overbearing social rules. By refusing to stay small, the person seizes the right to define their own life. In that quiet revolution, everything changes. Many relationships begin with gentle promises and shared dreams. So quiet that no one suspects the seeds of control buried in the background. The manipulator often wears a charming exterior, offering sweet words that feel like security blankets. Yet beneath that blanket lurks a shrewd intent: to mold someone's will, to reduce a partner's choices until they revolve around serving the manipulator's desire. Subtle conditions slip into daily life. The manipulator might discourage spending time with friends or family, craft a quiet tension whenever personal independence surfaces. All the while, illusions take shape, convincing the partner that these constraints are normal, that real love means obeying unspoken rules. Step by step, a person finds themselves asking permission for simple actions, editing thoughts to avoid arguments, sacrificing dreams to maintain so-called harmony. Eventually, a sense of emptiness grows, signaling that something is terribly wrong. The manipulator, tasting that emptiness, tries to deepen it further by adding guilt or silent scorn. They feed off the partner's confusion, controlling the narrative that claims the partner is too fragile or too naive to handle life alone. This dynamic deepens every time the partner tries to speak up, and is met with calm dismissal. Every time an act of self-expression is met with manufactured drama. But a moment arrives when the partner's spirit refuses to bend anymore. The manipulator sees a new fire ignite behind the partner's eyes, a sign that illusions no longer cloak the chains. Freed from illusions, the partner decides to dismantle each forced rule, one by one, quietly reclaiming the voice that was nearly lost. From then on, the manipulator's hold withers as the partner stands tall, no longer asking permission to exist. In that stance, the manipulator realizes they have lost the game, for the partner now sees the strings meant to bind and chooses to break them. Recovery from such manipulation demands a harsh reckoning with the emotional toll inflicted. At first, the partner might feel guilt for even considering escape, because manipulative relationships often rely on threads of affection and shared history. Healing emerges from discovering personal reasons to act beyond those oppressive rules. These reasons often revolve around authenticity, personal dignity, and the yearning to live unshackled. Once those reasons come into focus, no threat or guilt trap keeps the partner locked away. They tear down illusions that once paralyzed them